Go for it.
Okay, greetings. Welcome to the Missoula Public Library. Tonight we have a distinguished guest tonight. But first I want to tell you about upcoming attractions, which are, we have movie nights here 3 Fridays a month now. So one of them is for kids, 2 of them are adult type material, 1 more popular, 1 more artsy. So you should check out our movie presentations. This Saturday we have a folk singer coming in, Rachel Sadaka, no relation I guess. And she'll be here Saturday at 2 o'clock. And then we have some other things as well coming up through the summer and this fall. Tonight I'd like to present Helen Atthowe. She's the horticulturist at the Missoula County Extension Office, trained as an entomologist, I believe.
Some entomology.
Some entomology. And so we'll stick with calling her a horticulturist then. And she's here to present a database that she has constructed over many years and has finally made available to the public. For coming tonight, she gets a Missoula Public Library coffee cup, which has a quote on it from George Louis Borges. I have always imagined that paradise would be a kind of library. So here at the library, we kind of like that quote. Here you go.
Thank you so much. And I thought because Jim used to work with us at the Extension Service and I always had all the computer problems that I would have a quote from the Borgias. But apparently not. That's a good thing. Well, before I start, I want to tell you about exciting upcoming events with the Extension Service. And unfortunately, we're going to compete with the library upcoming events, but this Saturday, we now have a new farm school. We call it our Agroecology Research and Education Center. And what we're trying to do is do research and education into how to make agriculture, food production, fit in with conservation and land stewardship and wildlife preservation, and can we do that? So that's this Saturday. The first tour is Gardening with Nature, and it's at 2:30 at the Agroecology Center, the Missoula County School, which unfortunately is not in Missoula County, but is on my farm in Stevensville. So if you are interested, we will be glad to send you directions and just give us a call at the Extension Service. And that's this Saturday. And now we move on to the scintillating world of insects and diseases. And I know that you are all waiting with bated breath to find out who indeed are the top 10 in Missoula County. Let me just tell you how we got there. When I started at the Extension Service 10 years ago, we were having battles, as only we can have in Missoula, over spraying. And I think the main issue was spraying lawns. But people were concerned about reducing the use of pesticides. And how do you do that? How do you reduce the use of pesticides? Well, one way was to get to know better the pests that people were spraying for and find out, number one, if they were really a problem, and number two, how to target them more efficiently so we weren't just out there spraying randomly. It's springtime, and people call the office and say, something's eating everything in my yard. And is that the truth? Is there something always eating everything? Absolutely not. The wonderful thing about insects and diseases is they're real specific. They'll go for specific kinds of plants, specific families or genera of plants, and they will not randomly attack your entire yard or garden. So that gives us the basis for what we call an integrated pest management approach. And what do you suppose we mean by integrated? This is a library. We've got to have wordy people here. Integrated, what do you think?
What are you asking?
Integrated approach to pest management. If you were doing an integrated approach, would you just spray, or would you just go out with 2 bricks and squish them on the tree? No, good. She's going out on a limb. No, an integrated approach means that we would find a huge toolbox, as large a toolbox as we can, and figure out how to target the pest and be most efficient in its management as opposed to just spraying it. So that's what we've done. We've developed this integrated pest management program, and we go out and monitor weekly. We have master gardener slaves that take our master gardener course and then have to help us monitor. So all of this data that I'm going to report tonight has been collected over the last 10 years by me and my wonderful master gardener slaves. And what we've done is develop a list from 2005 of the most common pests that people complain about in Missoula. They come to our plant clinic and complain. So here are the top 10 diseases, and we'll go through each of these so that you can identify them, and there will be a quiz at the end. That's a joke. Okay, so shot hole fungus, Venturia blight, which is also a fungus, fungal leaf spot, powdery mildew, cedar apple rust, Cytospora canker, apple scab, western gall rust, peach leaf curl, and fire blight. And the first 9 are all fungus, and the last one is a bacteria. And does it matter if you can identify, if you know the difference between a fungus and a bacteria? Yes, she's going out on a limb again. Yes, indeed. And the reason it matters is because the management is different. The things that you would do to control the pest would be different. So I'm not going to, I took out, you'll be pleased to know, I took out all of the minute identification detail. But if you want more of that, we cover it ad nauseum, I suppose the Master Gardeners think, in Master Gardener class. We're just going to look at the diseases. So here's shot hole. And do you see why they call it shot hole? What do those leaves look like? Somebody just went right through them. Actually, the holes start, or the disease starts as a little brown spot on the leaf, and then as it expands, the spot falls out. And about the time the leaf is the brown spot is falling out of the leaf, we start to see this on the fruit. Some people will call that apricot scab. I do that sometimes as well. But basically, those are all the symptoms of this fungus, the shot hole disease. And that, you'll be pleased to know, is the big number 1 for Missoula, or was last year. Why do you think these fungus start on the leaf? And what do you suppose the conditions are that cause a fungal spore to germinate? Moisture on the leaf, exactly. The same things that make a seed germinate. Temperature and moisture. So if it's warm, and it was last spring and through the summer, and wet, then we get this disease. If it's dry, then we don't have disease unless, of course, people are irrigating with overhead sprinklers and it gets on the leaf. So what's one of the best ways, as part of our big toolbox of integrated pest management, to avoid getting this disease? Exactly. Don't overhead water. Keep the water off the leaves, and there'll be no place for that spore to germinate, and you won't get that first spot. Exactly. And if you don't get that first spot, then we don't go to the shot hole and then the apricot symptoms. Exactly. Number 2, the big number 2 last year was aspen. Have you noticed that aspen get almost all the diseases in town? It's very frustrating. They get a lot of diseases and insects, but this is the one that we saw a lot last year. Another fungus. It starts out as a leaf spot. You maybe can't see that as well. I wonder if we could turn off some of the lights because we're not quite seeing all the pictures here, if we could. Ah, that's a little better. It starts out as a light spot, and it also will attack the new greenest twigs on aspen, the real succulent ones, the ones that you had such hope for. And then they basically turn black and get this shepherd's crook look to them. And it mostly affects the younger trees or the trees that are growing real vigorously. So We know that it attacks young stuff and really vigorous stuff. Should you give aspen trees a lot of nitrogen? What does nitrogen fertilizer do to a plant? Lots of new vegetative growth, not lots of new twig growth and leaf growth. So would you add a lot of nitrogen if you knew you had this problem? Absolutely not. So avoiding nitrogen on aspen, in fact, they need virtually nothing. When you even compost aspen, you want to compost with a real low nitrogen compost. If you avoid nitrogen, and if you avoid getting water on the leaves, there are two more tools to our integrated approach to managing this Venturia shoot blight. And we haven't even talked about spraying any kind of chemical yet, have we? So decreasing nitrogen is a big key for all the aspen diseases, but particularly that one. Oh, and there's what it looks like as it continues on. It looks like a fire came through and just burned it, doesn't it? Number 3, the big number 3 last year in Missoula was black leaf spot. And again, aspen, it mostly affects aspen. It's the most common disease, in fact, of aspen. And again, moisture on the leaf exacerbates it. And what happens is you'll get these small dark spots that then have more of an orange halo. So there'll be a sense of brown and orange to the leaf, and then they drop off really early. So when they start to drop off, is that a good time to spray? If you were going to go in and spray with a fungicide to kill the fungus? No, then it's too late. So now we come to another tool in our integrated pest management toolbox, and that's to know what the conditions are of a particular disease and when it's in what point of it is in its life cycle, so that you know when to get it. In other words, when it's most vulnerable. So what we want to do if we were going to manage this disease, well, you tell me. First, on aspen, what would we do in the culture of aspen in terms of fertilization? We just wouldn't fertilize them much, right? But we'd certainly avoid nitrogen. We'd avoid irrigation by sprinkler. We'd do a soaker hose, perhaps. And then, if we still get this disease every year, if we get a wet spring, we have lots of rainfall, you call our pest alert phone line at Missoula County Extension that's updated weekly, and it says, we've had a disease infection period. If you've had problems in the past with leaf spots on aspen, you better put on a protective spray. The time to do that would be as the leaves are just expanding. And then anytime we have wet conditions early in the spring. Once we get to late summer, you can absolutely, without feeling lazy, say there's no point in doing it, it's too late. So black leaf spot.
So it doesn't kill the tree.
That is the good news, unless you have early defoliation for several years, 5 to 10 years, and the tree's not doing well, period. You won't kill the tree. It certainly won't look aesthetically as pleasing, but it won't kill the tree. Yes, the one that can hurt the tree, if they're real young seedlings, is that Venturia, that shoot blight. That could hurt it, but again, most of these are mainly cosmetic. So here is the next in our order of the top 10, and that's Septoria leaf blight. And again, aspen is one of the main hosts. Remember, we said that not all diseases diseases don't attack the same plants, that they have particular hosts. And in this case, it's the poplar family or populus family, aspen, cottonwoods, and true poplars. And so how does this look a little different from the last fungus that we saw? Let's go back to that one. Oh, that picture is not as good as I'd like it to be, but you can see this orange halo. Hopefully you can see that. When we get the database up, you'll be able to look a little more clearly. So that has an orange spot, whoops. And this basically looks like it has yellow and brown freckles on the leaf. So none of the orange halos around the leaves, and it tends to be spread out. But again, it is another one that's encouraged by water on the leaf, and is another one that you have to get early, and later in the season is too late to do anything about it. And here's what happens with this disease as well as the last one, the black leaf spot, is that you'll get early defoliation. So many, many years in a row, and it will weaken the tree. Okay, gosh, we finally got away from aspen. Are people going to never plant aspen again? Hopefully not. But remember, the integrated pest management toolbox, you have to know what aspen needs and try to manage them so that you don't provide the conditions for the disease to thrive in. Here's one that we're going to start seeing a lot of. We saw the first of it this week, and I expect that it's going to become prevalent in the next 2 weeks because we had disease infection periods for this disease during that, remember that real wet period we had? Because it was both wet and warm. Another fungus likes wet and warm condition, and this is called powdery mildew because of that white powdery fungal sporulation on mostly the undersides, but also on the surface of the leaves, and it always attacks the terminals or the ends of the branches. And we see a lot of that terminal white fuzziness in Missoula. We rarely see this russeting of apples or crab apples. In Missoula, it mainly attacks crab apples because quite common on terminals on crab apples, and may be up to 30 to 50% of the terminals on the crabapple tree. But we don't see that russeting on the fruit. However, if you do see that, it could be a result of the powdery mildew. So powdery mildew, again, if it just attacks the new growth, is it going to kill the tree? No. No. Okay, next in line of our top 10 is one that we're going to start seeing here pretty soon. We've already seen this spore stage. Has anybody seen these on their junipers? They look like big orange octopuses. Actually, they're not big. They're only about, I don't know, what is that, 2 inches by 2 inches, sometimes an inch by an inch. And then later on in the summer, you'll see kind of these brown, maybe in half an inch by half an inch, these brown galls on juniper. That's these spores with the spores gone. So this is a neat disease. It's very cooperative. It has 2 hosts, and it always goes from one to the other. So you need to have both for the disease to occur. So cedar, apple rust, who do you suppose the hosts are? Juniper, apple, and cawthorn. We see a lot on hawthorn. Hawthorn is a cousin of apple, so they're again in the same family. So what happens is about now, in fact, last week and the week before, during rainy periods, we'll see these orange octopus-looking things hanging on the junipers, and when it's wet and windy, the spores will be taken up in the wet wind, and it will land on the top of an apple or a hawthorn leaf, and then these spots will occur, and they're bright orange. If somebody had been smart, they would have figured out how to turn this into a cultivar and people would have bought it. But instead, it's a disease. So bright orange spots on the leaves, probably in the next couple of weeks through till the middle of July. And then when it gets hot and dry, this will basically slow its growth. And then when it's wet again in the fall, the underside of the leaf produces these little horned-looking growths, and they're orange, and the horned-looking growths are white. And then when it's wet, especially if you're irrigating, and you sprinkler irrigating, it will come back to the juniper. So springtime, from the juniper to the hawthorn or apple, fall, back from the apple to the juniper. So this is what it does on the juniper, kind of makes it unsightly. Again, it's pretty much cosmetic only. It won't injure the tree. And if you just liked orange spots on your leaves, it wouldn't even be a cosmetic problem. It can also injure twigs of the juniper. What happens is these brown galls that occur afterwards will girdle the branch, and you can get tip dieback from where that gall is to the end, although not too terribly serious in most cases. Oh, there's what it looks like on those little white sort of horned spores that are going to come back to land on the juniper. Okay, oh my goodness, look at this. We seem to have another problem of aspen. How amazing. So this is the next of the top 10, Cytospora canker, or we can say just one of the most common cankers in western Montana. And it will attack aspen, willows, and poplars. It basically attacks healthy bark, not necessarily bark that's been injured, but it will enter where there are holes, or God forbid we've had mower disease and we've managed to make an injury on the bark. And what you see is kind of a sunken area. Let's see if I've got a picture of the sunken. There it is. A sunken area. And later on, it will turn this bright orange color. But what you'll mostly see that will help you ID this is that sunken bark area. All right, and then you can see those orange fruiting bodies or spores. And there's what it looks like close up later on. So that's Cytospora canker of aspen. And there's also a Cytospora canker of spruce. Do you think the spruce canker will also attack aspen? What did I say in the beginning? Are spruce and aspen related in the same family? No. So what do you think? Different cankers, or will the cankers affect both aspen and spruce? Different, exactly. So the spruce canker will not attack the aspen and vice versa. So this is one that we see less commonly, but we did see it in Missoula last year, and that's it's harder to explain what this looks like. It's more you get more of a white oozing than a sunken canker.
Can I pause you for one moment?
You can. Oops.
There's a short in that wire.
Okay. Got it. Okay, so apple scab is one that's really dependent on temperature and moisture. So if it's too cold, even if it's wet, we're not going to see apple scab. So we don't see apple scab every year. But boy, the years that we do see it, it's pretty prevalent. And it starts as those velvety brown spots you see on the leaf, and then unfortunately moves to the apple, and you see those dark scabs, and as the apple grows, you'll get big cracks in the fruit. In fact, the spots will coalesce, and you won't even be able to see them as spots anymore. You just see darkness and cracking. But that's all caused by this fungus that affects the leaves in the spring, again when it's wet and warm. So you're seeing a pattern here, aren't you? To avoid fungus, what would you do? Exactly. Keep the irrigation water off of the leaves. And I was going to say pray for a dry spring, but that would be a bad idea. Let's not do that. So we'll talk about control, I think, later on. But again, keep water off of leaves is one of the first ones. Here's one that I have not seen much of yet this year, but it was a big one in our top 10 last year. And it's called Western Gall Rust. You see it on lodgepole and ponderosa pine, and about this time of year, if you go around and you look at the branches, there'll be this pink orange powder sort of flying about. And what that's doing is, again, those are spores, just like seeds that germinate, and they're looking for a new home, and it's usually newer growth on the pine trees. And so again, water and warm temperatures will be the perfect breeding ground or the perfect germination ground for these spores that are floating through the air. But I must tell you, I've not seen as much sporulation or these spores flying through the air this year as I did this time last year. So maybe we'll be lucky. And there's what the galls look like on our pines when they're not in that seeding stage or sporulation stage. And have you seen this on? Yeah. And again, in general, it won't kill the tree. Younger trees, if you have lots and lots of it, it can injure branches, but it certainly won't kill the tree, particularly a big old ponderosa tree, but it can make it somewhat unsightly. This is one that's kind of unusual, but we did see it made our top 10 last year, and this is peach leaf curl. Probably one of the reasons it's unusual is that we don't have that many peaches in Missoula. But this is, I have a question mark here on what the causal organism is. Does it look like the rest of the fungus that we've seen? Does it look like those leaf spots that we've seen? It really doesn't much, does it? What are the symptoms here? What looks abnormal? The leaves are puckered and distorted, and instead of brown and black, which is what most of them, it's turned it bright red. So this puckering, this distortion, that's all very indicative of this fungus called peach leaf curl. So that's all the fungus. And if you had to summarize, now that you're all experts on fungus, and you go out into your yard, how would you know if a leaf had a fungus disease? What would you look for that would tell you it was a fungus? Discoloration, and it would tend to be round spots, so distinct spots if you catch it early, and then the spots can coalesce into a spot, or what am I trying to say, a whole area, blotch. So we go from spots to blotches. But we basically would see, except for that peach leaf curl, what most of the fungi have in common is they attack with circular types of spots. Bacteria, on the other hand, and that's what this is, fire blight, a common disease in Missoula when it's wet and warm. Fire blight doesn't affect the leaf so much as it affects blossoms and the new twigs, the new growth. And it looks a little like that fungal blight on aspen, but remember that fungal blight on aspen also had a leaf spot stage to it. This basically will come in, and again, it looks like someone came in and just burned the tree, and the leaves will wilt, and the branch or the twig will turn black, but it'll also shrink and look like it's wilted as well. There are several stages at which this bacteria will attack the tree. If it's wet and warm during bloom, which it wasn't this year, fortunately, it will attack those blossoms and actually blight the blossoms so that they turn brown. And if you look really closely, you don't even need a microscope for this. If you look closely, you'll see what looks like a honey-colored ooze coming out of that blighted blossom. Same thing with this twig. If you look along the twig, or you take a little knife and go right underneath the bark, you'll see these little droplets of honey-colored ooze, and that's all the bacteria. So fire blight has the blossom blight stage, then it'll attack twigs, and unfortunately, this is where it can kill trees. It can affect larger branches in that it can be a canker right on larger branches and main stems. So of all the diseases we've seen so far, this is the one that could be fatal. Okay. In summarizing on the diseases, when I show you the database and how to use the database, it goes through all the management techniques, so all those tools that we talked about in the integrated pest management toolbox, but it also tells you when exactly the pest or the disease is most vulnerable and what kinds of control options you have. So we can go through all of those when we finish the insects. So I know that was very exciting to go through the top 10. This is almost like going through, I don't have television, so I don't remember what it's called, but my friends have been watching this show where they have the top performers and then they get rid of them, and at the end there was one person that won. That's what this is. This is the top 10 diseases in insects. So here we have the very exciting top that came into the Extension Service, and I'm very unhappy to say that the top insect, quote unquote, pest was spiders, and I don't even consider spiders a pest. That was people that found spiders not in their garden but in their houses. So if we're talking about gardens, I do need to say that spiders are the good guys. I've seen them taking down grasshoppers, but they're really good generalist predators. So try and be kind to the spiders. And I'm going to take him off our #1 list. We really don't want him on our #1 most wanted poster. We do, however, want aphids. Aphids have been problematic every year. They're really problematic this year. They've been in high numbers on both conifers, spruce particularly, and on many deciduous trees and shrubs. Particularly, anybody have ornamental plums? No? So you don't have curling leaves. Boy, they're really bad this year. Codling moth is the pest that causes wormy apples. Wasps and hornet, again, you know why that's up there. Yeah?
Aphids, what attracts aphids? What kind of conditions?
That's a good question, and I've been trying to figure that out entirely over the last 10 years, and I don't have an ultimate answer. They seem to like wet springs. When we have wet springs, we seem to have larger number of aphids, but there's winter temperatures involved, and I have not figured it out. Culturally, we know that succulent growth, they really like succulent growth, and as the growth hardens, when we get into July and August, we see less aphids. So high nitrogen, lots of water, anything that encourages succulent growth is going to encourage the aphids. So that's why aphids start out early on woody plants, and then they move to our flowers and particularly our pepper plants in the garden for their summer homes.
I've got them indoors. Well, I'm a container guy, I go in and out, but my indoor stuff, over winter stuff,
Oh, yes.
it's,
Yeah.
any kind of, I'm trying playing with conditions. Opening the windows, closing the windows.
For the indoor stuff, you've got the humidity that's going to encourage succulent growth. So I think on that one, opening the windows is a good idea and having as much aeration, but I think that one you're going to probably be stuck doing some spraying. Definitely. So again, wasps and hornets are not a pest to plants. People just have called, they're on #4 on the list because people called in about them a lot. But I also need to say that they are also very important beneficial insects. They're predators and parasites of many of the pests that we find in our gardens and in our landscapes. Do you know what a parasite does? You know what predators do? They just come and eat them up. And parasites basically lay their eggs, and they eat the inside out of the insect as they come out. It's wonderful. So these are good guys. There's a fellow in Colorado, Whitney Cranshaw at the University, Colorado State University, who's doing a 2-year study looking at how important wasps are to managing pests in home landscapes. So we wait with bated breath for his data. Pretty soon hornets will be our #1 good guys. The 5th guy on this list is one of the pests that can be fatal to trees, and those are borers. And the one that is most common is, again, aspen, our aspen borer or our poplar borer. And once it attacks an aspen tree, it's always fatal. It's just a matter of time. So we'll see that pest in a minute. Western fruit flies, they are the worms that we hate to find inside cherries. Aerophyid mites are also called blister or rust mites. We'll see them. Bark beetles, like mountain pine beetle, have you heard of them? They've become really problematic the last couple of years in western Montana. And white pine weevil. So we'll look at all these top 10, except we won't look at spiders because they're good guys, and hornets and wasps because they're good guys. So here's what aphids do. They curl leaves and they secrete this sticky substance that then ants are attracted to. So people will tell me that the ants are hurting their leaves and making them curl. No, the ants are milking the aphids that are causing the leaves to curl. So that's what aphids do. And basically, they start out in these colonies of soft-bodied insects, like over there on the left part of the screen. And then, when the plant that they've been feeding on becomes less succulent, they develop these winged forms. There's the winged aphid. And they head out to their summer cabins by the lake, which is usually the more succulent annual plants. So they overwinter usually on woody perennials, and then they move to the more succulent annual growth in the summer. And there are many different kinds of aphids. This is the most common aphid, the green peach aphid, and it's one of the few insects that is quite a generalist and will feed over several different families of plants. But there are other aphids out there too. Today when I was out scouting, I saw what's called the rosy apple aphid, which is a black aphid curling apple leaves, for example. Okay, this is the pest that everybody is most unhappy with if they have an apple tree, because while it certainly doesn't kill the tree, it sure makes the apples pretty uncomfortable to eat. And we are at codling moth time, by the way. This weekend is the time, the window to spray codling moth. We have a monitoring program for codling moth, and we catch the adults. There's the adult moth, gray with brown striping, in our pheromone traps. Does everybody know what pheromone traps are? It's kind of like insect perfume. And they're sticky traps, and you have the pheromone or the insect perfume that attracts the male moths, and you catch them, and then you know what the population is doing when the first moths arrive and when the populations are building. Does it catch female moths? No, only males. I could explain why that is, but it wouldn't look good for the guys in the room, so we won't say anything about that. But because pheromone traps only catch the male moths and doesn't catch the females that lay the eggs that hatch into these worms that then crawl from where the eggs are hatched on the leaf into the apple and forms that ugly mass in the apple. Because it doesn't catch the females, would these sticky traps, these pheromone traps, be a good control of codling moth?
Lower the population, but
It would decrease the males, that's true, but one female lays lots of eggs. So in other words, we don't need very many males. I could explain why that is too, but again, I won't. So, no, the pheromone traps are not going to be a good control of codling moth in your trees. But it is a good monitoring technique to let you know when they're flying and when the populations are building, and we use that as a tool. And then we have this great model that tells us how many hours at a particular base temperature. Codling moth likes 50 degrees Fahrenheit. They just don't do anything before it hits 50. They say, that's it, too cold, no way. When we get enough hours at 50 degrees Fahrenheit, then they start mating, they lay eggs, and the larvae hatch and come out, and they just start feeding on the surface of the apple. And you see what that looks like. We call it the first codling moth sting. And that's when you want to hit them. In this particular case, we don't want to kill the adults. We want to kill the children. This is when it's okay to be a baby killer. So that time, we've been monitoring for that. That time is probably going to be about Friday through the following Thursday or Friday. So if you have apple trees, this is the time to put out your codling moth sprays. And if you want to know, we're gonna go through that. Let's bring codling moth up as the first thing we pull up on our database. And then if you forget, you can go to our Pest Alert phone line at 258. I've had a mental block. I can't remember if it's 3820 or 2038. I think that it's 258-3820. And we also, of course, have this great database that's here in the library for you to come use at any time. And it's also on the county webpage. So, and we'll show you how to use that. But we'll talk about codling moths since it's time. I'll just say quickly that one of the things that I like the most, I've been spending a lot of time talking to the organic apple growers in Colorado and Washington State, and this is the program that they're using. Spinosad in Trust is what the commercial formulation is. The trade names for home gardeners are Conserve, Green Light makes one, and Monterey makes one. I can't recall exactly what they're called, Garden Spray or something along that line. But Spinosad is available in Missoula, and it is, it's certified organic, so it is one of the least toxic options, and it's been working relatively effectively for the organic growers who do this commercially. Usually it requires 2 to 3 applications of this Spinosad during this window that we're talking about. So start on Friday, and you may need a second one in about 10 days. Probably not something homeowners are going to use, but what the organic growers are doing is alternating the Spinosad with a virus that they spray every other week. But we can go more into that. And then here's the other big one, and this is the one that is fatal always. This is the poplar or aspen borer, and you know that you've got that this time of year when you start seeing this oozing down the side of the trunk. It'll be, again, a honey-colored oozing, and in this case it's not bacteria. If you go and look more closely, you'll see little holes with sawdust, or you won't maybe even see the hole, but you'll see a little sawdust stuck into this ooze, and it's that guy over there, that beetle, that has bored into that tree, and that tree has tried to sap him out, and all that sap is coming down the trunk. So, unfortunately, this pest has a really difficult life cycle, and I haven't been able to monitor very well for it, so we can't say this is the exact time to treat for this pest. Hence, I have to admit, we don't have as good a control option for this pest. We do, however, for this pest. This is western cherry fruit fly, the one that causes wormy cherries, and just as with the codling moth, they come in from outside, and so there's a time when you can start catching them in traps. And this fly you can catch on either yellow sticky card traps, which is what this guy's been caught on, or you know those red ball sticky traps that are supposed to look like apples, and you hang them. You can catch them in those traps as well. And this is what you what you look for a black fly about the size, a little smaller than a house fly, and they have clear wings with this very distinctive pattern, kind of a Z or a W pattern on the wings. And when you catch those in the yellow sticky traps, you don't have to spray until you catch them. But when you catch them, if you find 2 or more every week, then you need to spray for these. So the good news is that we don't have to spray all the time for them. The bad news is that there is no just cultural way to deal with this pest, that it is something that we have to spray for, so we try to limit the amount of spraying. Oh, now aren't these guys cool? Don't they look like something out of a horror movie? This is what they look like under the microscope. Thank God we don't have to run into this without a microscope. But these are eriophyid or blister mites, rust or blister mites, and they cause these raised blistery spots. And that almost looks like, if you saw that, would you have thought that was an insect? It looks more like what? A fungus, exactly, because of those round spots. Darn it. But if you look really close, instead of being right just on the surface of the leaf, they're a little raised, more like a blister. And we're seeing them right now on apple and crabapple leaves, and they haven't turned brown yet. They're more raised yellow spots. Have any of you seen that? I think this is going to hit our top 10 again this year. And here's what they look like on chokecherry. Not only are they raised spots, they're big welts. And these are called finger gall mites, and you can see that these little galls look like fingers. And this is what it looks like over on maple. It's a kind of a red blistering. So that's the mites. And the good news is that they're really cosmetic only. They're not going to hurt the tree. The bad news is that they're inside the leaf, so they're really hard to control. Really, the best time to get them is as the buds break and the leaves start to expand. The smart little mites have evolved to come out only when there's a food source. So when there's nothing on the table, no mites. As soon as the leaves start to appear, they will hatch and crawl out and enter the leaf. So that's a good time to treat them with something like a horticultural oil or insecticidal soap. Here's the big one. This is the one that we're all a little about this year. It probably should have been on our number 1 list. Certainly, it could have. But this is the mountain pine beetle, and they've been attacking ponderosa and lodgepole pine, and that's why we're seeing so much browning and dieback in certain places around Montana. Homeowners are having problems with particular trees. So the way you know that you've got this pest is that you start to see branches dying back. But in the next month or so, you'll start seeing this. You'll start to see what we call popcorn on the side of the trees, and it's the tree trying to sap out. It's exuding sap to try and get rid of the beetle that's boring into the tree. So when you see these little popcorn-like specks of sap all up and down the tree, that's a good sign that you have mountain pine beetle. Then you can also see this boring dust. As the insect bores in, that's what he looks like over there, the beetle, very teeny little insect for all the injury that it does. Then that beetle will lay eggs, the larvae will hatch, and they'll feed underneath the bark, and then you get this kind of pattern underneath the bark, and of course, that totally disrupts the straws or the vascular system of the tree that's bringing water and nutrients up, and that's why you see the branches dying, because, well, no straws, no water. So that's how mountain pine beetle works, and they're going to be starting to enter new trees or healthy trees in the next couple of weeks. So if you have a ponderosa pine that you really love and there's insect problem around you with mountain pine beetle, this is the time right now to be putting protective trunk sprays on your trees. The other thing to do, the cultural part of our integrated approach, would be to help those trees pitch that insect out. And the way you can do that is give them more water, particularly this time of year when the beetle is trying to enter the bark. You want to make sure that that tree is not at all drought stressed. Yes?
What's the spray for a good ornamental to prevent pine beetle from boring?
Into ponderosa pine? Well, the only thing, unfortunately, that we know that is effective is a liquid carbaryl. The trade name is 7. There's not a good organic approach.
What is that, 7? What is that chemically?
Carbaryl. It's a carbamate. Does that help?
Okay.
And that's as far as my chemistry goes. Okay, so mountain pine beetle. Here's one that has become increasingly common in Missoula the last 5 years, and of course it made our top 10 list. We're just out of the window to treat for this pest. It's a weevil. Let's see if I've got a picture of the weevil. I do not. It's a weevil or a beetle that overwinters at the base of the spruce trees. So in March, you can come through when they're just starting to think it might be time to wake up and come out of insect hibernation, which is called diapause, to come out of that rest state and start thinking about moving towards the trees. So in March, if you came out and you raked all around underneath the duff and exposed these guys, that would help to limit the population. And then about, well, from the beginning of May till the first part of June, the beetles will then move up to only the tops. You don't have to deal with the whole tree. You only have to deal with the top. They go to the very top of spruce trees. They bore in to that branch, and then they lay their eggs. You get those larvae. The larvae eat, and this is what you get. You get the tops wilting first. We'll start seeing the wilting in another month or so. And then they turn brown and they get a shepherd's crook. And at that point, what you want to do is prune them out, prune to the next branch, and that branch will then be encouraged to grow upright and get rid of them, so you can get rid of the weevil. Again, we're just sort of at the end, but last week would have still been time to spray just the tops of the trees and get those beetles or those weevils before they were laying eggs or as they were laying eggs. Okay, so that's it on the top 10 insects and top 10 diseases. We also get calls about people tell us they're insects and diseases, but they're not. They're what we call abiotic, or they're caused by the environment. And those top are animals, winter and frost injury, chemical injury, which is mostly herbicides, people getting too close to their trees and shrubs with their herbicides, drought stress, and then nutrient deficiency. Those are the big environmental ones that we see. So there's winter desiccation, and we saw a lot of this year on junipers and Austrian pines, particularly. And we saw winter injury, not just winter desiccation, but actual injury to the tissue because of that horrible thing that happened in February. Remember what happened in February? Remember, it was really warm and the lawns were looking abnormally green in early February, and then we were snookered with a cold spell. And remember how the lawns all immediately went from green to kind of a bronze color? Of course, they all grew back, but at that time, some of the trees that were coming out of their winter rest or their winter dormancy, some of them took a hit. So the junipers have a lot of dieback on them, and it's this winter desiccation or winter injury. There's some more of it. Kind of looks like the mountain pine beetle injury, huh? Then the other thing that sometimes we see is freeze injury, that new buds come out and they just blacken. So that looks a little bit like that blight that we saw in aspen, doesn't it? You have to look closely, and you have to know the history. So we haven't had too much freeze injury this year, but that is a possibility in some years. Drought, I guess I don't need to talk about drought. We all know what drought is. Most common on our water-loving or our water hog plants like birch. And you tend to see drought on the edges of plants and on the edges of leaves. Nutrient deficiencies, this is the most common one we see in Missoula. Anybody know what it is? Always on the newest leaves, and you see that yellow on the newest leaves. This is iron deficiency, and we often see it because the pH in soils is too high. But that's the most common one. All right, now I'm going to pull up the database, and we can turn, can we turn on the lights? I think we can turn on more lights. Thank you very much. We'll get rid of that little guy. And this database, as I said, no. This database is available here at the library. Jim can tell us how, I haven't used it here, but I think it just comes up when you go to the computer. Jim, how do you get to the database on the library computers? Oh, this is the third one.
Yet.
I see. He could tell you, but he'd have to kill you.
Yeah, we have, on our public machines, we have a favorites button at the top. All of the OPACs, all of the machines that the public accesses. And in one of the options in that favorites list will be the plant database at some point.
Oh, okay.
You're not going to make it available online?
It is available online with the county.
Yeah, we're just going to leave it with the county.
Okay.
Yeah, we're not going to.
That address is?
It's god-awful long. It's just ridiculous because the Missoula County Extension Service didn't have a web page, so it's this really long address, and I'm sorry I don't have it off the top of my head. But if you call the Extension office, we will give it to you.
Yeah.
But apparently you just can zip right into it, and you'll get this page.
Okay.
And this page is the opening. And so then we would click on it to open it. Let's see if we can make that bigger. I don't know if we can. I guess not. I guess that's what we get. And then we come over here, and we can either search by plants, or we can search by the particular pest. So if you know what the pest is, you can go there. Otherwise, you would go to the plant. And we can all identify every plant in our yard, right?
The ones that are supposed to be there.
Okay, that's good. The ones that are supposed to be there. So,
Are these things known as weeds?
I've seen those. I know what those are. So, we wanted to go look at codling moth, and we'll do that. Do you want to start with codling moth, or do you want to search a plant, and I'll show you how to do that?
Plant.
Okay, so let's go to the plants. All right. So what plant do we want to choose? What have we had a problem with?
Not Codiana.
No, I can't. You have to give me something that I definitely have. Landscape plant.
Tomato plant.
Tomato. How about more of a landscape plant? I don't have as many vegetables in here. I have some, but mostly what I have is trees and shrubs, some flowers. No tree?
Cherry.
Cherry? Okay, so we'd hit C for cherry. I'll try tomato. I don't think we have tomato though. Okay, and then we'd go to cherry and we'd hit cherry. And it's going to give us stone fruits, which is cherry, chokecherry, plum, etc. So everybody in that family. And then we have a key based on the part of the plant that's being affected by the pest. So if it was on the whole plant, or if it was on just the leaves, or if it were on the trunk, or all the way down to the fruit. So, do we have a specific problem that we're thinking about on cherry?
No, I was just curious.
You were just curious? Okay, well, I've just harvested my cherries, and oh my God, there are these worms in the cherry. So let's go look in the fruit. So the fruit tunnels, no. Sunken corky areas, no. Puncture wounds, no. Maggots in cherry. Okay, well, there's something in the cherry. Let's see what that looks like. So then we'd hit that, and it would give us a color picture. And we'd say, oh, that's it. That's exactly what's in my cherries. And then we'd want to see a description to make sure that the picture was really telling us what it is. Aha, the maggots are legless, about 1/4 to 3/8 of an inch long. Yeah, that's it. And they're a little white in color. Oh, okay, that's it. We haven't seen the adults. So because we have more tools in our IPM, or integrated pest management box, than just spraying, we would, of course, look at the life cycle to find out when they're problematic and if we even need to worry about them at this time of year. We see that they move to cherry trees in late May and in June, and they lay eggs, and then the maggots feed on the cherries. Okay. So what are our control options? Well, wow, birds will eat them. That's great. So we don't want to be killing off the birds. We want to encourage birds. Well, some of the birds, right? Maybe not the birds that actually eat the cherries. The plot thickens. And we can trap the adults. We had talked about that on the yellow sticky card or the red ball, sticky traps. And what can we spray for those cherry fruit flies? If we catch more than 2 flies per week, we can spray with pyrethrin, which is a botanical insect. It's an insecticide. It's another least toxic option, or spinosad that we talked about. And the other thing, the cultural thing, is to avoid that heavy nitrogen fertilization again, and water extremes, so too dry and too wet. Yeah?
If you've got that problem with on the cherry fruit, we've got cherry tree and ravens like the cherries.
Right.
Do we encourage the ravens so that what's in those maggots don't proliferate or not?
You know, that's a really good question. It's a good ecological question. So if you always have maggots and you didn't get to spray for them, if the birds eat the fruit, they will also eat the maggots. The problem is you won't get any fruit. So if you can give up some fruit for the year, yeah, they'll take care of them. And in fact, we've done studies where we've netted the trees, and we've had more maggots on the netted trees than on the unnetted trees. We've also had more crop on the netted trees. So if we could just have birds that only ate insects, there's some of them, but unfortunately.
You how to choose the cherries.
Yeah, if they could just eat the ones with maggots in it. So clearly we just need to do some animal behavior work. You know, if ornithologists would just ask the right questions. So there we have cherry. Now let's go back. Well, let's go all the way back, and let's go home, all the way home. So here we are. So now let's search for that codling moth. So we go to pests or diseases, and we go to C for codling moth. We go straight down, and we look it up, and we hit it, and it takes us straight to the insect. And we have a picture of the larva, the adult, the stings. It'll tell us what plants we will find it on, the life cycle, all of that interesting stuff that I know you're going to read very carefully. Probably will lose sleep because you'll read it so carefully. And then we zip down to the controls. Whoops. Let's zip up here. So obviously a lot of information on codling moths. So number 1, we want to remove and destroy apples that drop to the ground for just the reason that you were asking. We don't want to have a buildup of those larvae for next year. There's mating disruption if you have an orchard. If you have an acre or more of apples, you can use those pheromones to confuse the males. Being typical males, they're easily confused with lots of pheromone. If you just have one tree, however, it's just going to encourage them to come in. But if you had enough of the pheromone out there, it would be like walking into a room and you were looking for one particular person, but everybody is wearing the same perfume. It would be confusing to find them. That's not the best analogy, but I hope you're following. So that's mating disruption, but it doesn't work for one or a few trees. You really need at least an acre of trees. Tree bands, that's certainly in the literature. The life cycle of codling moth is that they tend to fall in the apples, and then they will overwinter in the ground and on the lower trunk of the tree often. And then they overwinter as a cocoon, and then they hatch in the springtime. So there's been some thought that if you put bands around the tree, a couple feet up, and you can either put just straight bands or put sticky bands around, that as the larvae crawl up, they will be caught and not make it up there.
So explain which direction these bands are going.
Oh, I'm sorry. So here's the trunk of the tree. You would wrap the band around the circumference of the tree.
So it's a tight band, just like you're wrapping it around?
Like a cardboard band.
Uh-huh.
And then you can put sticky stuff on it to catch them.
So they're crawling up?
That's the general thought. I need to tell you that I wouldn't depend on this as a control method.
They're not even, they're saying it's partially effective.
Exactly.
But even if it's only partially.
That's true. It's another tool in the integrated pest management toolbox for codling moth. You're absolutely right. I shouldn't be pejorative at all about it. But I wouldn't you do it only.
Yeah, well, definitely.
Yeah. In fact, I think I say that there. I talk about some research that gave us only about 40 to 50% control if that was the only thing you used. Okay, so that's the cultural. Then we moved on to the biological. So there's predation. There's all kinds of predators, and we want to encourage them. BT, do people know what BT is? Bacillus thuringiensis. It's a biological control. It's a disease that's very specific. It only affects the larvae of moths and butterflies. So it doesn't affect other predators and parasites, which is very nice. It has to be ingested because it's a disease. So it can be sprayed on the leaves, and then the caterpillar will eat the leaves with the BT on it and will get this disease, and it takes several days for the larva to die. The problem with codling moth is, remember that life cycle? The eggs hatch, and the larva will maybe feed on the leaves a little bit, but then they days, and they move immediately to the apple. They feed on the outside of the apple, and then they bore right in. So you've got about a week window from when that larva hatches to when he's inside the apple. So there's not much time for him to ingest something that will then be a disease and kill him. So unfortunately, the BT has not proved to be particularly effective in and of itself. But it's certainly an option. So there's all the biological options. Let's go down and look at the traps. So codling moths are attracted to molasses and palm sugar bait traps. And here the thing is, and this probably won't surprise anybody in the audience, apparently the women like the sweet stuff more than the guys. So you actually can, with the sweet traps, get the female codling moths attracted. So that's kind of neat. I wonder what chocolate would do. No, that's a joke. Just use the molasses. Okay, then we talked about the pheromone traps already. There are black light traps, those kind of traps that catch all flying insects at night. And they will catch the codling moths. Unfortunately, they catch everything. So you may get the moths, but you wipe out the neighborhood of everything else, including some of those beautiful lunar moths. So black light traps, what can I say? We talked about mating disruption. Now we'll zip right into chemical. So there we talk about the spinosad, and we talk about how often to spray it, and we talk about how to spray it. That you want to add a feeding attractant to the sprays, like molasses, and something like insecticidal soap to keep it stuck on the leaf so that it's out there longer, that it doesn't break down as quickly. So there's the spinosad. There's another biological called neem. Neem is a botanical from a tree, unfortunately, that does not grow in this country at all, so it has to be imported. Pyrethrins are another option. Kaolin clay is one that they have played around with quite a bit in Washington State, and they're recommending. It's basically a bentonite clay that you spray over the leaves in the apple, and it's just it kind of turns the tree white. And it basically helps to keep the larva from getting into the apple. And again, some efficacy there, but not 100%. Let's see, and we tell you how to use that. And then we tell you about the granulosis virus and where to get it. And we tell you where to get the Entrust if you can't find it in town. When we first started this, there weren't so many people carrying it in town, but now all of our wonderful nursery and garden supply places have actually listened to us at the Extension Service, and some people are carrying the spinosad now. So, there's codling moth. Anybody else have any pests that they want to play with on this database to see how it works? Do you want to come up here and actually play with it rather than watching me do it? We have plenty of time.
Hoppers?
Leafhoppers?
Hoppers? Well, grasshoppers.
Grasshoppers. Let's go back.
Play with it. I'll try.
I'm sorry?
I'll try from the grass.
You want to try it? Okay, come on. Come in and get out of... So we're in codling moth. You've got to get back home.
Where do I?
So probably just...
So,
yeah, just get out of that, and you'll have to hit here, the computer. Oh, we went all the way back. Okay, so open it up again.
click here to open the Planet Diagnostics.
Exactly. Okay, so grasshoppers, where would you go? Okay, they're just going to tell us.
They'll provide some help.
There's no reticence in the peanut gallery here. All right, and so grasshopper. Oh, you could do that. That's true. See, she's doing what I didn't do, but you're gonna put in the keyword. Go for it.
Type.
Exactly. Go for it. I don't think that way. I'm an older generation. Okay. All right. So then we click on grasshopper. It looks like. I wonder if it wants you to do the one that's in color.
Yeah, click on that. It's working.
Oh, no, it's working. And there we have it. All right, so I'm going to just step aside and tell her what you want to know about grasshoppers, and she'll tell you.
Yeah. Which
Hold on, what are we doing?
He's going to tell you what he wants to know, and you're going to look it up on the dead.
What time for egg hatching?
Oh boy, you're going to have to go to the life cycle. Oh, and look at that. You can just see these computer literate types, I'll tell you. I would have probably, gone down to the life cycle, but nope, you can zip right there. So what does it tell us?
You want me to read it?
Yeah.
Cool. These species overwinter in the egg stage in the soil. Eggs are laid in pods in the soil during late summer and fall, and nymphs begin emerging in April, May, and June.
Ooh.
Research-
Now. Excuse me. So now.
Researchers have found that grasshopper hatch often corresponds with the time lilacs are in full to late bloom.
Dum, da, dum, dum. So we're just finishing lilac bloom, aren't we? So they're here.
Biological controls are what?
Oh, she wants to know biocontrol, so better look and see if we've got some biological control. There's cultural. Let's see if there is any biological.
I also have a couple of machines set up back here so you can play with the database yourself.
Just go scroll down. Oh,
There it is. Oh my goodness, there's quite a bit of biological control. Boy, someone was verbal who wrote this, didn't they? Just didn't know how to shut up. See anything exciting there that might jump out at us? Oh, yeah, there's a really good one. Nosema locusta.
Apply it by hand.
It's a disease, exactly. And the trade name that you'll find it around town is semaspore. Semaspore.
cool.
Cool, huh? So you want to play with those ones in the back? You don't want to watch me do this, I'm sure. Don't you want to get your hands on this? Is this not exciting? Color pictures of insect? Will you ever watch television again? My goodness. Well, that's pretty much what I have except for playing with the database and questions. Any questions? You're just awed by all of this exciting insect and disease information. If you've been so encouraged and you want more, we teach a Master Gardener course that starts in September. Call and get on our list.
You constantly updating or?
Oh, wouldn't that be nice? You know, if we had Jim, the computer guy, still working with us.
Well, you do update it.
We don't.
You update the master copy.
We
I know
could.
it's been updated at least once since you first put it out.
Okay, we found problems immediately and I couldn't stand them, so we updated it. But there's nobody in my office. It's all a bunch of middle-aged computer nerds or computer non-nerds in my office. So we have to hire someone to come in to update it. We hired Bob. So we probably won't update it for at least a year.
But whatever the most recent copy is, that's what's showing on the website of the county.
The website has the most recent copy, which was updated just a month or two ago. So yeah, it's pretty fresh and exciting.
So does the county extension have a weed department too?
Yeah, it's not with the extension, but it's the county weed district. But
County weed district.
exactly, but we're all in the same office.
Okay.
So yeah, there's several employees of the county that work for the weed district, and they would be in the same building that I am, which is at 2825 Santa Fe Court, out directly behind the Albertsons on North Reserve.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Let us know what you think of the database. Just don't tell me if there's too many changes that we have to make.
And the Missoula Public Library will have CDs that you can check out.
Oh my
So
goodness.
It'll be available for you to take out a CD and run it at home.
What a great...